So good evening. Welcome back to Professor Academy's question paper analysis of UGC NET English December 2021 Shift 1. And today we are going to analyze questions from 81 to 85. Let's go to question number 81. Which of the following does the Subaltern Studies project contain? So before we look at the statements below, let's understand subaltern. If you know that, then you can easily eliminate the options. When we say the subaltern, it refers to the marginalized people, right? Not the mainstream one or the mainstream history. The history of the marginalized or the marginalized people like the aborigines, the Dalits, and others, right? Now let's look at the four statements below. Capital A, traditional historiography celebrated the role of the subalterns. The subalterns here refers to the marginalized people. Historiography refers to history writing. So do you think traditional historiography celebrated the role of the subalterns? So number one statement. B, traditional history of India's freedom movement celebrates the contribution of select icons. C, traditional historiography highlights the dominant strands of India's freedom struggle. D, subaltern studies historiography highlights the dominant strands of India's freedom struggle. So what you have to do, first eliminate. Subaltern study focuses on the history of the marginalized people. Do you think such a study highlights the dominant strands of India's freedom struggle? That is D. That can't be, right? So subaltern studies can only focus on the unwritten history or the alternative history of the the mainstream one. So if you eliminate D, you can eliminate option D here. Then look at C. Traditional historiography highlights the dominant strands. That is true, right? Whenever we look at an established history, they always celebrate the dominant story. So that is there. A similar way, a traditional history of India's freedom movement celebrates the contribution of select icons, not all the leaders across the states in India. And do you think traditional historiography celebrated the role of the subaltern? They forgot that. So now you can go for the options. So option A and B only. Option B, A and C only. Option C, B and C only. Option D, B and D only. It's a bit easy, even without knowing or without reading about this subaltern studies in detail. With your general understanding, you can eliminate the options and arrive at the answer. Answer is C, B and C only. Traditional history of India's freedom movement celebrates the contribution of select icons. They forget the contribution of people from the marginalized section, right? So that is the statement, and that's what subaltern studies talks about. Then traditional historiography highlights only the dominant one, not the marginalized. So these are the two statements subaltern study is concerned about. So what is subaltern studies? It's a field of study focusing on creating a new historiography, not the established one, which people are aware of, which tries to focus only the mainstream one or the dominant one. They forget the contributions by the marginalized community. So subaltern studies focuses on creating a new historiography that would trace, recognize, and register the history, culture, and actions of the subalterns. So this is the aim of this one. And when we say subaltern studies in India, we think of this critic Ranajit Guha, and he is also the editor of the journal and also the collections of essays published in the journal. We have this collection, A Subaltern Studies Reader, 1986-1995, published by Oxford India Paperbacks. You can check out this work, and the essays in this work and the contribution of the essays contributed by other major critics under subaltern studies. Let's go to question number 82. Match list 1 with list 2. List 1, we have text, critical text. List 2, critiques. So we have list 1, A, modernity at large, against which we have one J. Urry, URRY, John Urry. Then B, the tourist gaze, against which we have two, Edward Said. Then C, culture and imperialism, against which we have three, CLR James. Then D, the black Jacobins, against which we have four, Arjun Appadurai. This question is based on postcolonialism. And the moment we say postcolonialism, we think of Edward Said and his work Orientalism. And we also know Edward Said is known for his another work, Culture and Imperialism. Even if you know that, we can eliminate only one option, C2, right? Culture and Imperialism was written by Edward Said. But in the options, we can eliminate only option A, in which a C goes for 4, Appadurai. But all the other options clearly indicates that Culture and Imperialism was written by Edward Said. So option B, C, and D, in all these options, we have C, which is associated with 2. So it's a bit tough question unless we know one more option, one more pair, then we can eliminate, or else we have to go with instinct. So the answer is C. Modernity at large. This work was written by Appadurai, Arjun Appadurai. Then B, the tourist gaze by Jean Urry. C, culture and imperialism by Edward Said. D, the black Jacobins by CLR James. Let's look at these books and their contribution. When we say Edward Said is a very important critique under postcolonialism, and his famous book Orientalism. How the Orient, how the East is portrayed or represented in the Western discourse. So that is Orientalism. And in this book, Culture and Imperialism, he came up with this idea called contrapuntal reading. What is this contrapuntal reading? It's a mode of reading by which, what we do, we try to expose the imperial and colonial ideologies that are conveyed indirectly in European texts. So what we have to do, we have to read between the lines and expose their ideologies hidden there. For example, when we read Dickens' Great Expectations, it seems like a normal story. But when we read with this methodology, contrapuntal reading, we can identify there is a mention of Australia, a penal colony. For instance, in this in Dickens' Great Expectations, we have a character called Abel Mackwich, and is a convict, and he is sent to the penal colony, Australia. Then towards the end of the novel, he comes back. Okay, and when we read between these lines, we know it is implied. This imperial and colonial ideologies are implied in the text, but it's not told directly. And as a postcolonial critic or a student of postcolonial criticism, we should read this text between the lines, so that, and if you do that, and that is called contrapuntal reading. Then we have The Tourist Gaze by Jean Urry. Again, when we say gaze, you look something at as an object. You objectify certain things. When we say tourist gaze, as a tourist, what we do, we go to a new place, from our homeland. Then we look at the environment with interest and curiosity, as if something new. And we are trained in such a way. For instance, if we go out now, we want to sound sophisticated. We want to tell others, I visited these places, I visited this state, I visited this country, I visited this historical place. So in the modern society, if we want to sound sophisticated to others, we have to say that I travel a lot. But when we travel a lot, instead of appreciating a particular place or the tradition as it is, we look at them as a tourist, with the eyes of a tourist, objectifying things and taking photos and sending it to our friends, and we just objectify it in the sense we remove it of its culture or its history. It is just an object to show off. So that is a tourist gaze, and this happens because of mobility. So in this age, we can move one place to another. Similar way, the Europeans, they visit the third world countries like India or Pakistan or Sri Lanka or any other place for that matter. And when they come here, their gaze is like a tourist gaze. They objectify it, they come up with a preoccupation and with the pre-knowledge, and the moment they look at Taj Mahal or any other tourist place, they want to just capture it through photographs and other things. So in other words, we gaze at what we encounter. So this is again a bit associated with post-colonial criticism or something called spatial theory. Next, we have this book called The Black Jacobins by C.L.R. James. C.L.R. James is a historian, Trinidadian, West Indian. So C.L.R. James in this book talks about the history of the Haitian Revolution, 1791-1804. Why is this important? People hardly talk about the revolution by the marginalized people. Right? They always talk about the colonizer, but they don't talk about the resistance offered by the colonized. So here it talks about how the Haitians resisted against the French colonial government. And this is a history of that revolution in detail. And look at the title, The Black Jacobins, because the word Jacobin refers to a group of people who protested or kind of formed a radical group formed after the French Revolution in France. So the Jacobins were responsible for beheading a lot of people, aristocrats. So C.L.R. James says, here the people of Haiti, they are the Black Jacobins who are now fighting against the French colonial government. And here is a statement from this book. The French officers had been ashamed to let Bonaparte know the true results of their battles with the black generals. So it's not just an easy victory, or the blacks here in Haiti, they protested against them and even defeated them. Then we have this work called Modernity at Large, subtitle Cultural Dimensions of Globalization, written by an Indian American critic, Arjun Appadurai. And according to him, he says, when it comes to the European critics, they fix a certain moment as a universal one. For instance, they say modernism. When they say modernism, they refer to, in Europe, especially in Britain, they refer to the 1900s after the growth of Industrial Revolution. So from 1900s, they call that moment modernism. So that is a fixed moment in that society. It doesn't mean that is the same everywhere. We can't say modernism happened in India in 1900s or in other places in Africa in 1900s. So they overgeneralize, right? So that should not be the case. So grand Western social science has steadily reinforced the sense of some single moment. So modernism is not a single moment that happened in the 1900s in Europe. So it's, when we say modernism, it differs or varies from place to place, continent to continent, or country to country. So there cannot be a single modern movement or modern moment. Okay, so that's Arjun Appadurai's argument. So what happens? So when we talk about a history of a particular country that ruptures this idea, so this is called a theory of rupture, which disturbs the established idea of history and the fixed moment called modernism. And for instance, if we talk about these two elements, media and migration, and their joint effect on the work of the imagination, then our idea of modern subjectivity changes. So this is again something to do with post-colonialism. Next question number 83. Which of these does the book How to Read Donald Duck identify as an important element in its analysis of imperialist ideology in the West in the Walt Disney comic book? Okay, again connected with the post-colonialism. So here is a mention of a book called How to Read Donald Duck. So which element, important element, is identified in this work? Something connected with imperialist ideology, right? Colonialism. Option A, heartless civilization. B, impoverished royalty. C, noble savage. D, scientific magic. Let's go to the answer. C, noble savage. So before we look at this book, let's look at this concept called noble savage. So when we say noble savage, the character is a stock character, a character that is represented again and again in European writings, in European novels and other works. For example, we have this Queequeg, 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 in Herman Melville's novel, very established novel, published in 1851, Moby Dick. So in this work, we have this Queequeg, but he's a kind of a refined savage, noble savage, who is known for his innate goodness, but still an uncivilized person when it compares to a European. But there is some goodness within him, and he is not corrupted by civilization or industrialization. And we can come across characters like this across European writings. And this character is called noble savage, someone uncivilized, but keeps that or possesses that goodness in him or her. And we can identify the same thing when we read the comics, produced by Disney, Walt Disney and Walt Disney's comics and cartoons. So the book was written by Dorfman, Dorfman, and Mortellart, Mattealart. This is a book, How to Read Donald Duck, subtitle, Imperialist Ideology in the Disney Comic. This book, I would say, is a kind of a practically reading, practically applying Edward Said's contrapuntal reading. So what was contrapuntal reading? You read between the lines and you try to identify the implicit ideologies, imperialist ideologies, and that's what done by these two authors by reading the comics. So what they do, they found out that the similarities between the noble savage, the stock character in European writings, is almost similar to children, because children, we think they are uncorrupted by the society, the industrialist society or the civilized one. So they are more like the noble savage, and we feed certain ideologies to them. So that is the contribution by this book. You can also read this one. Then question number 84. What was the name of the journal published from Bowling Green University beginning 1969, which carried essays on amusement parks, comics, and detective films? Option A, Journal of Cultural Studies, Culture Studies. B, Journal of Mass Culture. C, Journal of Popular Culture. D, Journal of Public Culture. Sometimes, even without knowing this, so you can eliminate options. For instance, we have a separate unit prescribed for UGC Net English called Popular Culture or Cultural Studies, right? So at least we can eliminate two options: Journal of Mass Culture and Public Culture. This should be something to do with culture studies or popular culture. And let's see, answer C, Journal of Popular Culture. So why this university is famous? So in this university, for the first time, Department of Popular Culture was founded. It was founded by Professor Ray Browne in 1973. This is the only institution in the US to offer both UG and PG courses in popular culture. So if you want to get an MA in popular culture, this is the university that offers courses like popular culture, both UG and PG, even PhD now. So Bowling Green State University. So that's why this university is famous, and the journal produced by that university, especially this department called Department of Popular Culture. And in this university, we have a famous library called the Browne Popular Culture Library, named after that professor who founded that department. And this library was founded in 1969. It is shortly called, abbreviation, BPCL. And this is the objective of this library, the Browne Popular Culture Library, to acquire and preserve research materials on American popular culture post 1876 for curricular and research use. Now they are also focused on other popular cultures. We come to the last question of today's class. Arrange the following journals in the chronological order in which they started publication. So in 2021, shift 1, we got a lot of questions from journals and publications. So hereafter, we should make a list of journals published. So we have 4 journals here, periodicals. Capital A, the Tatler; B, the Examiner; C, the Review; D, the Spectator. We have to arrange it in a chronological order based on the publication, which came first. So option A, we have A, D, C, B. So in a sense, the Tatler, the Spectator, the Review, and the Examiner. Or let's go for option B. It starts with B, B, A, D, C. Then option C, C, A, B, D. Then option D, C, A, D, B. It's a bit tough one unless we know which came first. Of course, we can easily identify the Tatler and the Spectator. But the other periodicals, they're tough to identify. But once you identify, then that could be an easy question. So answer is C. First came, C, A, B, D. The Review, then the Tatler, then the Examiner, and the Spectator. Let's look at them, each one of them. The Review, which came first, founded by Daniel Defoe, the novelist known for Robinson Crusoe. Right? It ran from 1703 to 1713. So what we can do, so we can make a list. Okay, Review 1703, then another one. So chronologically, if you have a list of journals, established journals published across the world, at least we can eliminate options next time. And this journal was published thrice weekly. Next, the Tatler, very, very famous one, founded by Steele, Richard Steele, and it ran from April 1709 to Jan 1711. It came out thrice weekly, Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays. And Steele used a pseudonym for this journal, periodical, Isaac Bickerstaff. And those who contributed, there are a lot of contributors. Significant ones, we have Jonathan Swift and Joseph Addison. Then the Examiner, it's a Tory periodical, supporting the Tory party, founded by John Morphew. It ran from 1710 to 1714. And one of the important editors, we have Jonathan Swift himself. Then comes the Spectator, founded by Steele and Addison. It ran from March 1711 to December 1712. It was issued daily except Sunday, and they created a kind of an imaginary society, a club called the Spectator Club in this periodical. And one of the important characters, Sir Roger de Coverley. So we have something called the Coverley Papers by Addison and Steele. And it's an imaginary character, an English square of Queen Anne's reign. Then December 1712, it came to an end. But after a period of time, Addison revived this periodical in 1714. And it was issued thrice weekly for 6 months. Then it came to an end for once and for all. Okay. So with this, we finish today's analysis. Thank you so much for listening. And please subscribe to this channel for further updates. And again and again, we will come up with another 5 questions, and we'll also go for another 5 tomorrow. Thank you so much.